Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Childbirth's podcast. Today's guest is Amanda Gorman. Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Amanda Gorman. I am a wife and mother of two little kids, and I live just north of it.
That's not far from me. Like it's driving distance. So, can you tell our listeners about your addiction and how you overcame it?
Yeah. So I am a recovering marijuana addict, and I have 8.5 months of sobriety. And the backstory of how I realized that I was an addict is I started smoking weed in college, like many people. It was not a problem for me at first. But by the time that I was a senior in college, I was smoking night, day, anytime from morning to night. And I told myself that it was to help me manage my anxiety. And it was to a certain extent, and it worked for me for a while to a certain extent. But then after a while, it stopped working, and it actually made my anxiety worse. And I met my husband when I was in my early 20s. We got married in our mid 20s, and we decided to stop smoking right after we got married. And it took longer for me to do that. So that was kind of like my first sign. But I did stop. And in all honesty, it was because I got this message of, if you want to be a mom, this is not compatible with motherhood. So I stopped smoking for a year before I had my daughter, and didn't smoke for almost 3 years. But then after I was done breastfeeding, I decided to reward myself with my favorite guilty pleasure. So smoked for a couple of months, and then we decided to have another baby, and did the same cycle. So stopped with the towards motivation of having kids. So my son, I stopped breastfeeding him. He turned a year old in November of 2019. Started the habit back again, just like I did after my daughter. And to me, it was like a nightly glass of wine. Instead of having a nightly glass of wine, I would take a hit of the vape pen, and it seemed manageable at the time, and it was. And then we had every intention of quitting again after a couple months of doing that. And then the global pandemic hit here it hit in full force, and lockdown happened in March of 2020. So when that happened, that was all the excuse that I needed to just keep smoking. And slowly but surely over time, I started increasing my usage and justified, well, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to be a parent of two toddlers in the middle of a pandemic. Things are stressful, and this is a great stress reliever for me. And so what was a nightly habit turned into an afternoon and nightly habit. Then that turned into a lunchtime through nightly habit. And by a year ago, I was again smoking from morning to night. But this time I was a mom of two kids, and it was really, really not working for me. And that's when I realized I have a problem, and the idea of stopping seemed insurmountable to me. So thankfully, I hit my bottom in the fall, thankfully, and also not thankfully, unfortunately. I hit my bottom in the fall of last year, and life was just, it was very difficult. It was chaotic. I did not care about anything. Like, I just had an apathetic attitude towards everything. And, I wasn't able to connect with my kids like they deserved, like I wanted to. I wasn't able to connect with my husband like I wanted to. And things just they became unmanageable. So I realized, this smoking from morning to night was no longer working for me. It was no longer serving me. And again, I was using it to manage stress and anxiety, and it actually made my anxiety worse.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to a point where I was using so much that, I was barely even, like, your tolerance goes up so much that I was barely even feeling high. And honestly, I would get really irritable especially around my kids, because I would be slow. And so they were doing their toddler thing and they'd be running around yelling, and I would just be kind of slow. And instead of being patient and having foresight to think of a creative way to kind of distract them and get them back on what I wanted them to do, I would just be like, like, oh, what are you doing? Like, stop doing that. And so I really just ultimately I decided that I needed to stop smoking weed for myself and for my kids so that I could be a present mom and be the mom that they deserved. So I did stop on October 4th of 2020. That's my recovery date.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was extremely hard. So a lot of people don't realize this, but there are major withdrawal symptoms when you stop smoking cannabis, especially if you are a very heavy user. So the withdrawal symptoms are insomnia, lack of appetite, night sweats, irritability, mood swings, feelings of depression, anxiety. So it's pretty rough, especially for the first 30 days. That's pretty typical. So I went 6 days, cold turkey, just white knuckling it as I had before. But this time it was just so much harder because, again, we were still in the middle of a global pandemic. And the other thing is, when you smoke a lot of weed, it numbs you to all your feelings. And so all of the feelings that I had been numbing and suppressing were there. They were under the surface waiting for me. And so then they popped back up and I had no coping skills. And I found myself extremely emotionally dysregulated. And so thankfully, after 6 days of being sober, I found, by the grace of God, Marijuana Anonymous. So I found some online meetings on Zoom. And I went into a Zoom room one night and with a bunch of other women that were total strangers. And I just listened as they shared their frustrations, shared a little bit of their story and their experience. And I was like, this is me. This is my story. This is exactly how life has been for me. And it was incredible. It was a life-changing experience. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why didn't I find this sooner? Like, why haven't I been in these rooms for longer? But just feeling grateful. And my recovery journey since then has been difficult. It's been a lot of hard work. It's been a lot of times of feeling cravings and relearning or learning maybe for the first time how to process my emotions and how to deal with my feelings. One thing that I realized about myself is that I grew up with the limiting belief that pain was to be avoided and negative emotions were to be avoided at all costs, and that you should just try to be happy all the time.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah. I just thought that's how I was supposed to live life. And so as a consequence, I would, anytime something uncomfortable happened, I would, run away from it or numb out by getting high. I also, I drank some alcohol. I drank like somewhat, but as a part of my recovery journey, I decided to give up all mind-altering chemicals, even though I didn't necessarily have an issue with alcohol. I'm an addict, and I identify as an addict, and I know that there is a danger of cross-addiction. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that all feelings are valid. Pain is not necessarily to be avoided. There's a difference between pain and suffering. So I don't have to suffer in life. When I feel painful feelings, I can process them like any other happy, joyful feeling. And I'm just fine. And when I have any type of mind-altering substance like wine or weed, it alters my perception of reality, even just a tiny bit, and it makes it more difficult for me to process my feelings. And I don't know, I just came to the conclusion of like, why do I need to take a substance to make life more fun or enjoyable, or to make me feel better about myself, or make me feel cool or worthy? Like, I finally, after a lot of healing work, I came to the conclusion that I'm fine just as I am, just in my, state of mind. A big part of the struggle, I'll say, was habits of, even with alcohol, I loved a nice glass of red wine when I was like cooking dinner. And so I would find myself cooking dinner and like sad and grieving the loss of that habit of like, what, that was so nice. That was just such a nice habit. What am I going to do instead? And so that's been an interesting part of my recovery journey as well, of like, what am I going to do instead, or in a social situation or with a group of people that I used to smoke with, what does that mean for me, and how does the relationship change, and how does my sobriety, how do I deal with that without impacting them or, trying to change people, places, or things. So yeah, that's where I am today. Again, I'm going on 9 months of sobriety. On July 4th, on Independence Day, I celebrate 9 months independent from that addictive substance. And life has gotten a lot better. I still go to nightly, well, not nightly, but I go several times a week to Marijuana Anonymous meetings online. And the support that I have found there has been so incredibly helpful and encouraging. I finished the 12 steps. So just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, there are 12 steps to recovery in Marijuana Anonymous. And so I completed that with the help of a sponsor. And life is just a lot better. I can enjoy my children. My relationship with my husband has improved so much. I have cultivated self-compassion for myself, and actually, can be more gentle with myself as well. And I am working towards my passion in life, which I discovered along my journey. I realized a year ago, when I was still in my addiction, that I wanted to be a childbirth educator. I became obsessed with childbirth when I was pregnant with my own kids. And I thought it was just because I was pregnant. But now that I'm potentially done having kids, I am still fascinated with childbirth. I think it is the most common miracle in the world. And I love having conversations about pregnancy, labor, birth, postpartum, and how that impacts your life and how you transform as a person. And so, in January of this year, I started getting certified to become a childbirth educator in earnest. I started the process last year, but had to take a break for my own healing and sobriety. And I just got certified in a couple weeks ago, in the beginning of June, as a Birthing from Within childbirth education mentor. Yeah. And obviously this is something that's been a long time coming as well, because a year and a half ago, I started a podcast called Finding Your Village. And the podcast is about birth, postpartum, and parent mental health. So being sober, having tools to emotionally regulate, has enabled me to find my passion in life, be the mom that I want to be the wife that I want to be the person who loves herself, and give back in this way that is totally life-giving for me, because I just, like I said, I love talking about this. And I am launching my new business, my online childbirth classes, in July. So.
That's awesome. I was looking on your website and looking through your podcast. That's nice. So it launches in July?
Yes, it launches on July 7th.
Nice. And you're going to have guests, like how I do on my podcast. You're going to have guests, women come on and speak about their childbirth and stuff?
So the classes that I'm launching on July 7th are actually classes that are just private classes with me. It's a group setting, but I am also doing the podcast weekly, which I started a year and a half ago. And I'm on a break right now for just a couple weeks while I get everything launched for the classes. And I am going to start the podcast again on July 18th. And so I'll be interviewing more guests about parents about their birth experiences, but also interviewing experts that can help parents, whether it's, with breastfeeding trouble or sleep issues, or about getting through birth or getting over a birth trauma.
Oh, okay, that's nice. Because I was just asking my coworker the other day. I was like, so what is it called? Postpartum depression?
Postpartum depression, yeah.
That with childbirth, like, is it different from like what I would have? Like, I don't have kids or anything, but is it different? Like, how is it different?
I can't speak for how it would be different from just, generalized depression. I think that a lot of the symptoms are the same, but the thing about postpartum depression that makes it very specific is that it generally comes on between 6 weeks and 6 months after having the child, after giving birth. And a lot of the symptoms are what you would think of with depression. So just feeling hopeless, lethargic. It can affect your sleep as well, and your moods in general. But another interesting thing that can happen during postpartum depression is feelings of rage, like extreme anger, feeling resentful against yourself, your family, or even your child. And there's also a spectrum of postpartum anxiety, which can even bring up some anxious thoughts, some OCD tendencies as well. And so there's really a spectrum of perinatal mood disorders that is pretty common. It's between 1 in 4 birthing people and 1 in 5 birthing people actually have postpartum depression or a perinatal mood disorder.
Wow, I'm
Yeah.
glad you're setting this up to help new parents and parents in general,
Thank
because
you.
I did not know this was happening. Like,
Yeah.
my friend was telling me like she resented her daughter. She didn't want to hold her or anything when
Yeah.
she first had her. I'm like, really? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to hold her? And she was like, no, I didn't want to touch her. And I was like, oh wow, I did
Yeah.
not know that happened.
It does happen, and it is more common than you think. And she did nothing wrong. It's nothing that a mom brings on themselves, and it doesn't mean that they don't love their children or anything like that. It is a mood disorder, and so it can be managed with medication or talk therapy, learning coping skills as well, and it doesn't last forever. So that's the positive thing, and that there's a ton of people out there that are supportive and encouraging to, seek help and just alleviate that situation as well.
Ah, okay. I learned a lot today on this podcast interview.
Great.
I want to thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on my show today and speaking with me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, everyone. I want to thank you so much for listening to my podcast interview with Amanda. If you want to find out more about her podcast, you can go to her link. It is tinkering below. It's findingyourvillage.com. And I want to thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.